Corpse Bride began as a whisper in the dark, a tale of love that refused to rest, and death that refused to win. But beneath the lace and the lanterns, it was obsession wearing beauty's face. Burton lived two lives, one in daylight, one among the dead. A composer who sang for lost souls, giving the grave its voice, and a story too haunting to censor, too exquisite to erase. These are 20 weird facts about Corpse Bride, and hidden inside the vows and the velvet, it was the folktale that crawled from the grave. The candles dimmed, the shadows fell, but love kept dancing in the dark. Number 1. Corpse Bride didn't begin in a studio. It rose from the dirt of an old ghost story. The idea came from a 17th century Eastern European folktale that had passed through generations by word of mouth. In it, a man jokingly recites his wedding vows beside a forest grave, slipping a ring onto what he thinks is a tree branch. But the branch is the finger of a dead woman, and the corpse rises from the earth to claim him as her husband. Storyboard artist Joe Ranft, who had worked with Tim Burton on The Nightmare Before Christmas, rediscovered this story in the early 1990s. He handed it to Burton, who was instantly captivated by the macabre irony, a tale where love and death share the same altar. To him, it wasn't horror, it was tragedy, romance, and fate woven together. Burton and his writers reshaped the legend for modern audiences, trading its Jewish setting and moral lesson for a more universal fable set in Victorian England. The rabbi became a priest, the corpse a heartbroken bride, and the man a nervous groom caught between two worlds. What began as a whispered warning about temptation evolved into a stop-motion elegy for love, the kind that refuses to stay buried. Number 2. In 2003, Tim Burton did something almost no director had ever dared. He made two massive films at once. While Charlie and the Chocolate Factory unfolded in one studio filled with sugar and color, Corpse Bride was being painstakingly animated frame by frame just across the lot. Burton spent his days surrounded by bright candy and wide-eyed children, then crossed into a darker world each night, a candlelit realm of ghosts, bones, and broken vows. Co-director Mike Johnson acted as Burton's right hand, overseeing the stop-motion crew while Burton drifted between sets. Even the cast was caught in this eerie double life. Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, and Christopher Lee performed their Charlie roles by day, then slipped into recording booths after sunset to give voice to the dead. Danny Elfman, exhausted and exhilarated, scored both films at once, racing from chocolate rivers to coffin songs. It was chaos and creation all at once, two worlds beating from the same strange heart, proof that Burton could dream in daylight and still find beauty in the dark. Number 3. Though the title says Tim Burton's Corpse Bride, the film had two masters. Burton shaped the story's soul, the tone, the characters, the crooked poetry of its world, but the grueling day-to-day animation fell to co-director Mike Johnson. While Burton floated between projects, Johnson lived inside the puppets, overseeing every twitch, blink, and tilt of the stop-motion cast. Johnson often said his job was to make Tim's drawings breathe, and he did it one frame at a time. Every movement was logged, photographed, and tested before advancing the clock by a single click. Burton's imagination gave it life, but Johnson gave it motion, a ghostly duet between dream and discipline that made the dead come alive. Number 4. 2 weeks before filming began, Corpse Bride quietly changed the history of animation forever. For decades, stop motion had been captured on film, slow, costly, and impossible to preview. But visual effects supervisors Chris Watts and Peter Moisers suggested something radical: shoot it digitally. They replaced the traditional 35mm cameras with high-resolution Canon still cameras, a move that let animators see their work instantly instead of waiting days for film to develop. The shift saved time, money, and countless nerves. More importantly, it preserved every grain of texture, every whisper of shadow, with crisp precision never seen in stop motion before. That single innovation became the industry's turning point. The movie about love conquering death had, without meaning to, resurrected an art form, dragging stop motion into the digital age, one ghostly frame at a time. Number 5. The world of Corpse Bride may look small on screen, but behind the camera it was colossal. Every inch of Burton's gothic fairy tale was handcrafted, from 10-inch puppets with glass eyes to sprawling miniature graveyards built large enough for animators to walk through. The team at McKinnon and Saunders, the same puppet masters behind Fantastic Mr. Fox and Frankenweenie, spent years constructing more than 300 puppets to bring just 30 characters to life. Each lead had multiple duplicates for different expressions: 14 Emilys, 12 Victors, and countless background ghosts and villagers. Inside each puppet, delicate metal armatures allowed for microscopic movement, but they were so fragile that faces cracked and joints snapped constantly. One wrong turn of a key could destroy days of work. Producer Allison Abate joked that the crew became surgeons for the dead, constantly repairing tiny fractures and repainting ghostly features between takes. The sets around them loomed like dollhouse cathedrals, gravestones towering over animators, skeletal trees rising to the ceiling. It was a world where the dead stood small, yet their story felt enormous. A miniature universe built by mortal hands, one frame at a time. Number 6. In Corpse Bride, emotion wasn't painted, it was engineered. Each puppet's skull hid a maze of miniature gears and levers, so precise they were compared to the inside of a Swiss watch. Instead of swapping entire heads, animators used tiny keys, inserted behind an ear or through a hidden socket in the scalp, to adjust every smile, flinch, or trembling blink frame by frame. The result was revolutionary. For the first time, stop-motion characters could express subtle human emotion, a flicker of doubt, a nervous glance, a shy grin, all through mechanics no bigger than a fingernail. Co-director Mike Johnson called it animating the soul. One delicate twist of a key could turn cold porcelain into heartbreak. In a story about life after death, it was the machinery of emotion that truly made the dead come alive. Number 7. Emily's first reveal, when she lifts her veil to show her face, lasts only seconds, but it nearly broke the animators. That wisp of fabric wasn't CGI. It was a real, hand-stitched veil made from the thinnest silk imaginable, rigged with nearly invisible wires. It had to flow like smoke, shimmer like moonlight, and still obey the brutal precision of stop motion. Every movement was agony. If the veil twitched wrong or caught the light badly, the entire shot had to be reset, sometimes after days of work. Cinematographer Pete Kozaczek called it a glamour shot for the dead, and he wasn't kidding. Months of tests and wire replacements finally made the fabric float just right. In the end, that fragile scrap of cloth became one of the film's most haunting images. Beauty suspended between life, death, and madness. Number 8. Helena Bonham Carter might have been Tim Burton's muse, but that didn't earn her a free pass to the afterlife. Out of the entire cast, she was the only actor asked to audition for her role, lending her voice to Emily, the heartbroken corpse who still believed in love. She recorded test lines with quiet emotion, her voice trembling between tenderness and tragedy. Then came 2 long weeks of silence. Burton finally called, saying she had the part, but by then, Bonham Carter was half convinced she'd lost it. She later teased that he'd made her wait like an anxious bride, and Burton only laughed, saying maybe there was a little torture. In a story about love, loss, and patience, even the corpse bride herself had to endure a little heartbreak before saying, I do. Number 9. When it came time to give the underworld a voice, no one expected the composer himself to step into the grave. Danny Elfman had written Corpse Bride's entire score, but one song, Remains of the Day, proved impossible to cast. The number called for a fast-talking skeleton with jazz swagger and graveyard rhythm, a singer who could make death swing. Dozens of auditions later, no one fit. So Tim Burton turned to Elfman and said, you do it. Elfman hesitated. He wasn't a trained jazz singer, but he was the soul of Burton's world, the sound of all its ghosts and dreamers. So he gave the one-eyed skeleton Bone Jangles his own rasp and rhythm, growling out lyrics between coughs and laughter. Each session shredded his throat, but the pain gave the voice its edge. A skeleton that didn't just sing, but rattled. When the scene finally played back, it was pure Burton magic. A smoky cabaret in the afterlife. Music echoing through bones and shadows. Elfman later said, it nearly killed my voice, but it gave life to the dead. Number 10. Hidden deep in the archives of Corpse Bride lies a song that never made it to daylight. Composer Danny Elfman originally wrote a mournful ballad for Victor called Erased, meant to capture his heartbreak and longing after being torn between the living and the dead. It was to be a quiet, human moment in a story of ghosts, Victor sitting alone in the afterlife, wishing for the world he left behind. The song painted him not as a hero, but as a man lost in his own choices, whispering regrets into the dark. But time, as always, became the enemy. With pacing concerns and studio pressure to keep the film under 90 minutes, the scene was cut before Johnny Depp ever recorded it. Elfman laughed years later, admitting, probably much to Johnny's relief. For years, Erased was just a rumor among fans, until a rough demo surfaced online in 2010, sung by Elfman himself. The haunting melody feels like an echo from another world, the voice of a groom caught between 2 loves, and one song that refused to stay buried. Number 11. Johnny Depp didn't spend weeks preparing for Victor Van Dort. He had 15 minutes. While filming Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Tim Burton casually mentioned Corpse Bride and asked if Depp wanted to take a look. Depp read the script between takes and said yes, thinking the voice work would happen months later. Instead, Burton showed up the next day and said, we're recording tonight. With no time to rehearse, Depp grilled Burton for a quarter of an hour. Who was Victor? How did he think? How did he breathe? Out of that frantic conversation, the shy, nervous, finger-twisting groom was born. Depp later admitted, Victor's just me at 17, scared, awkward, and hoping not to ruin everything. One spontaneous evening gave life to one of stop-motion's most human souls. Number 12. Before Corpse Bride ever opened its coffin, one man's shadow loomed over every frame. Ray Harryhausen, the stop-motion pioneer who taught generations that monsters could move with soul. His creatures, from the battling skeletons of Jason and the Argonauts to the towering beasts of Clash of the Titans were the dreams that raised Tim Burton and inspired the animators who brought the dead to life. During production, Harryhausen himself visited the set. The moment he walked through the studio doors, everything stopped. It was like a god entering the room, co-director Mike Johnson remembered. Animators rushed from their workbenches just to shake the hand that had moved myths. To honor him, they hid a tribute in plain sight. When Victor plays piano early in the film, the name Harryhausen is engraved on the lid, a small gesture carved in reverence. For the crew, it wasn't just a nod. It was a thank you to the man who made clay breathe, who gave monsters grace, and who proved, long before computers, that imagination could outlive its maker. Number 13. Before a single puppet was built, Corpse Bride existed entirely inside Tim Burton's sketchbooks, crooked, thin, and bursting with melancholy charm. In 2003, Burton handed those sketches to Spanish character designer Carlos Grangal and told him, "Push them, but don't lose the soul." Grangal refined the shapes, exaggerating bones, stretching limbs, and keeping every imperfection intact. The resemblance between Victor and Johnny Depp was pure coincidence. The designs were finished long before casting. When Depp finally came aboard, Burton laughed and called it good karma. The puppets looked like they'd been waiting for him all along, the living man who already looked like he'd stepped out of the land of the dead. Number 14. Tim Burton didn't just design two worlds, he built a philosophy. In Corpse Bride, the land of the living is painted in cold grays and washed out blues, its people stiff, proper, and half dead inside. The land of the dead, by contrast, bursts with neon color, music, and laughter. Life was silent, death had rhythm. Cinematographer Pete Kozaczek described it as an inversion of fear. The dead were vibrant, the living were ghosts. The contrast came from Burton's lifelong love of German expressionist cinema, where emotion was shown through color and shape. Straight lines meant oppression, spirals meant chaos, and curves meant freedom. In the end, the real tragedy of Corpse Bride wasn't dying, it was living without joy. Number 15. When Corpse Bride reached the ratings board, Disney braced for trouble. A film filled with corpses, murder, and afterlife weddings didn't exactly sound like family fun. Some board members argued it was too grim for children, warning it could risk a PG-13 rating. But Tim Burton refused to tone it down. There would be no forced sunshine, no edits to make death cute. He believed kids could handle darkness, that they understood sadness better than adults gave them credit for. The MPAA ultimately settled on a PG, citing macabre images and thematic elements, a quiet nod to the film's eerie soul. It was one of the rare times a major studio let a children's movie stay truly strange. In the end, Burton's ghosts didn't frighten audiences away, they enchanted them. Death had never looked so alive. Number 16. At its core, Corpse Bride isn't just a love story. It's a journey through three realms. The film weaves together the living world, where color drains and manners suffocate, the land of the dead, where ghosts sing and dance in neon hues, and the shadowy forest, the borderland where both collide. Each world mirrors the characters' emotions, cold and gray for fear, warm and glowing for freedom. Tim Burton designed this contrast as visual poetry. The living move like clockwork in their muted town, trapped by rules and repression, while the dead celebrate chaos and music, their afterlife bursting with joy. Between them lies the forest, that fragile threshold where love dares to cross boundaries. In the end, the story isn't about life or death at all. It's about finding color in the place you least expect it. Number 17. As production neared its end, tragedy struck behind the scenes. Story artist Joe Ranft, Burton's longtime collaborator from The Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach, died in a car accident just 1 month before Corpse Bride premiered. His sudden passing stunned the animation world. Ranft had helped shape the story's emotional arc and pushed for the film's final message of release over sorrow. In his honor, the film was dedicated to him. Fittingly, Corpse Bride became a meditation on death that celebrated life, a farewell gift to the man who helped the dead dance again. The dedication that fades in during the end credits isn't just a note. It's a quiet goodbye from one storyteller to another. Number 18. When Corpse Bride finally reached theaters in 2005, it carried the weight of a small miracle. Stop motion was nearly extinct, dismissed as too slow and expensive for modern audiences. But Burton and his team proved the art form still had a pulse. Made for about $40 million, the film earned nearly $118 million worldwide, a modest success that felt monumental for a movie built one frame at a time. Critics praised its beauty and melancholy, a love story caught between life and death that somehow felt timeless. And when awards season arrived, it crossed over again, this time into Oscar territory. Corpse Bride earned a nomination for Best Animated Feature at the 78th Academy Awards, standing proudly alongside Pixar and DreamWorks giants. It didn't take home the gold. Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, claimed the prize, but that hardly mattered. For Burton, it was validation that his haunted fairy tale had become something something rare. A work of art carved from shadows, recognized by the living world. A film about the dead, honored by the Academy. Proof that even ghosts can make history. Number 19. Nearly 2 decades after its release, Corpse Bride still lingers in closets, makeup kits, and Halloween aisles. Emily's pale blue skin, stitched smile, and cascading veil have become icons of gothic beauty. A look that blends romance with decay. Each October, her image resurfaces on costumes, fashion lines, and even wedding themes inspired by her ghostly grace. In 2022, a full makeup collection launched in her honor, turning her shimmering eyes and blue lips into wearable art. On social media, fans recreate her with everything from body paint to couture gowns, keeping her story alive through style. What began as a stop-motion fantasy became a cultural mirror, proof that beauty doesn't fade with time. Sometimes the dead don't haunt the living, they inspire them. Number 20. Corpse Bride wasn't made just for children. It was crafted for the grown-ups still haunted by life itself. Beneath its songs and skeletons, it quietly turns one of cinema's deepest fears upside down, that death is the end. In Burton's world, it's not. The living trudge through colorless streets, chained by duty and greed, while the dead, of all people, are the ones who laugh, sing, and dance freely. Adults saw themselves in that mirror. The film's afterlife isn't scary. It's liberating. It's about letting go of perfection, of guilt, of everything that makes the living world feel suffocating. When Emily dissolves into butterflies, it's not tragedy, it's peace. Kids saw a ghostly fairy tale. Adults saw a quiet truth. Sometimes you only start living when you stop being afraid to die. Bonus fact. For years, fans have whispered that Corpse Bride was almost a very different love story, starring Jim Carrey and Angelina Jolie. Picture it, the manic energy of Ace Ventura proposing to the brooding mystery of Lara Croft. It sounds too strange to be true, and that's because it is. No studio memo, no casting call, not even a whisper from Burton's crew ever confirmed it. By the time production began, the roles were already sealed for Burton's favorite duo, Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, Hollywood's reigning gothic romantics. But like any good ghost, the rumor refused to rest. Decades later, it still drifts across movie trivia threads and fan pages. Proof that even in the age of fact-checking, the best legends have a life of their own. In the end, Corpse Bride wasn't a ghost story. It was a love story that learned how to let go. It showed that even in the coldest grave, there's beauty, forgiveness, and the courage to move on. Tim Burton didn't make a film about death. He made one about release, about learning that love's truest form isn't possession, it's freedom. Decades later, its message still lingers like a haunting lullaby, that life and death, sorrow and joy, are all part of the same dance. If this story still moves you, drop a comment. Tell us what strange and beautiful world we should wander into next, because as the last candle flickers out, and in Burton's world, the heart never really stops beating.